Okay, hey everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Honeit Talks podcast. Super excited to have Drew McDanald and Aspen Whitlock from Tango Alpha 3. I'll let them introduce themselves and the firm, but they have a very interesting niche. We've been working together for some time, and I think they're onto something. So we're excited to shine a light on what they're building and how they're helping. Drew and Aspen, can you talk a little bit about Tango Alpha? How did this happen? And you got to explain the name.
Yeah. So we actually started out of Northern California's NorCal Staffing Group. But we, it's like everything else, it kind of evolves, right? And so we found ourselves, we started developing this niche around supporting DoD customers across a very broad enterprise, and with military veterans as our primary, TA's talent acquisition strategy. And so as we got more and more into that space, we wanted a name that reflected that was less regional. And so Tango Alpha is the phonetic, in the phonetic alphabet, for talent acquisition. And then the three, people, process, technology, and also like that domain was open for a website. So that worked out for us too. So I mean, that's kind of our background, but our niche is, so we do a lot of service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, providing IT services. Our core differentiator is our recruiting and our focus on veterans, and we staff global IT infrastructure programs from sustainment, transformation, and securitization. Honeit's just been a really good tool for us to help translate the military skill set to maybe people who don't understand it as well.
So just a little bit of to kind of back off or piggyback off of what Drew was saying. So this will kind of resonate with software people. Like, you don't develop software in a vacuum. Well, you also don't develop a business model in a vacuum, right? You develop it around real customers. And so, we were lucky enough to be a part of a few kind of global IT sustainment programs geared towards servicing the federal government. And so we got really good at recruiting people all over the world, whether that's at a big metropolitan area like Washington, D.C., or somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Kansas or Montana. And we found that veterans were the people that were willing to go anywhere, and then had the certifications and the clearances required by Department of Defense to, work as a contractor. So we kind of developed our niche around our customers. And so now we just kind of stumbled into this corner of the market that we're in now, by chance in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's needed. I mean, there is that disconnect, and I've always, when you see that on a resume and you see a couple job titles and you're like, well, what is that systems analyst for on the sub? Like, it's kind of a new job title. You can't even really imagine what that person's doing because it's top secret and it's clearance and all this stuff. So there's just fundamentally a disconnect in not only mapping jobs, but because we don't even know what we're mapping to what we're mapping, right? Because there's secret. There's just, unless you've been in that submarine or understand what those individuals are doing, it's like hard to even understand it. So I guess, talk to me about that. How are you bridging the gap? How are you helping understand what a systems analyst in the military may have done versus what a systems analyst, and just loose terminology there of what that might be in the civilian or private sector?
Yeah, so I can take this one. Well, anytime you're doing tech recruiting, you're always dealing with a translation problem. As a recruiter, I'm not a network engineer. I'm not a systems engineer. I'm not a cybersecurity engineer. I can pretend like I know what I'm talking about, but in reality, most of the time I don't. At least at a very granular level. And so you're always dealing with that translation layer. You tack that on to working with candidates that are getting out of working in a military environment, who haven't necessarily been coached on how to write a resume or how to talk about what they did in the Army per se, and how that relates to working in a data center or an IT shop or whatever that is. So you're dealing with two translation layers stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
So
I love, not to cut you off, but
no, for sure.
What you just said there is so paramount, even to just regular technical recruiters, or I would even loosen it to not even technical terminology, but marketing roles and scientific roles and we work with a lot of firms who do like nurse staffing or healthcare staffing, and similarly, there's this language taxonomies, expertise that you can dig really deep to understand like what this nurse does versus what this nurse does, versus, or science. So, or even the 78 types of marketing jobs out there, right? Like what distinguishes a web analytics professional from a paid search so. Yeah, I love where you're going with that, but there has always been this translation or communication ambiguity. When we're in the middle, we're the conduit.
Yeah, no, exactly. And historically, recruiters have solved that with kind of half-hearted write-ups that don't really speak to much of anything that's actually relevant. Just trying to bridge the gap between a job spec and a resume. But most of the time, fall pretty short, and really requires on the phone with the candidate to gauge whether or not somebody's technically proficient. So Honeit's been a cool tool for us there to allow candidates to speak to their experience in their own words, and you're not having to rely on a recruiter to take that, translate into something that makes sense in here, and then retranslate that to somebody who is more technical. Usually hiring manager, at least in our customers, is an actual senior engineer who's staffing up his team. So it definitely increases the one speed up to submittal, but two, candidate fall off, right? You don't have people who are going to slip through the cracks just because their resume is not perfectly buttoned up.
Are you finding, how are your hiring managers receiving the links? Like, are they finding that that's a helpful kind of differentiator? I mean, it provides value to them, helps them kind of get to know the candidate from that end, or?
Yeah, I mean, it sped up our time to get feedback because nobody likes reading resumes, nobody likes writing resumes, and so you shop a bunch of resumes out and send them to your hiring managers, and it take days to read that, but they can go through, they can pull up a Honeit share link and listen through relatively quickly and decide whether or not they want to talk further with the candidate or dig further into the resume. I don't know what they're looking at first, but it's definitely sped things up. I guess from a feedback perspective. Drew, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, no. So I totally agree, but I think a lot of that is when in a traditional write up, it's kind of like a little you use a bunch of marketing language, you try to sell your customer into a candidate, and I just think the Honeit link is it's authenticity, right? I mean, it's like I'm not going to tell you about the candidate; I'll let the candidate tell you about themselves. And so I think certainly for me, it takes the pressure off of, I hope I didn't describe this incorrectly, right? You have an opportunity, you can have the candidate tease certain things out if you know the candidate and the customer, and then, you are no longer responsible for translating, like the candidate can do that directly.
Has it helped with even some of the internal communication within your team and within the firm in terms of one person talks to a candidate, can quickly share that with someone else to collaborate, or second opinion type stuff without duplicate calls?
Yeah.
Those games, or?
Absolutely. So Drew and I are kind of notorious for calling each other for sanity checks. Like, hey, I'm about to pitch this candidate for this. Like, does this make sense? And it's been cool because I can share a candidate screen directly with him. He can go back and listen to it, and vice versa. So it's been really good for that. And one thing we're looking to start using it for, we haven't fully implemented it. We use a couple other technologies that make the implementation a little bit tricky, is training. So we've got a new recruiter who's working with us, and, we're getting you to the point where she can fully run candidate screens and stuff by herself. And it's helpful to have button to press. This is the question to ask, the thing to talk about. What happens if the conversation, takes a left turn? Like, you can just skip ahead to, 2, 3, 4 questions down, click record. Definitely speeds up the learning curve too, or I expect that it does. We haven't exactly been able to implement that yet, but we're working on that.
That's awesome. Like, how do you clone yourself? I think that's something good recruiters have always wondered, is like, I'm hesitant to have someone else take my calls because there's trust issues, and, but like, you give them the playbook, i.e. the call guide, and say, hey, these are the 6 questions to ask this specific candidate. Anybody can ask those. The challenge has always been understanding what a good versus great answer is, but you could do that after their call, and review that with them potentially.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, definitely simplifies things.
That's right. What would you say, like, just in terms of veteran recruitment as kind of a broad topic, like what would you say is kind of some of the fundamental philosophical challenges with some of that, or even maybe the tactical challenges with that? And our organizations bought in that it's an important thing and that they just can't implement it, or is it even trouble like communicating the value prop at a high level? Or
no, I find organizations very much want to do it. I find that it's really a translation problem. All the functions that get done in a business get done in the military. They're called different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the military, because of their unique mission, will do things, in a very, certain way. But what you'll see is they'll have really kind of strange job titles and things like that. But if you, so it's a translation thing. But if you give someone if you tease out an explanation, it actually makes sense. And Honeit provides a very structured way for you to be able to do that, right? In a predictable manner, because you kind of know what the pattern's going to be and where someone's going to have to explain something. You can kind of map all that out and really ease the translation, because it really is. It's just a matter of understanding what this word means on this side of things, right? Mm-hmm. And also just the unique mission of, well, why are they moving around the network? It's like, well, then they have a mission.
They got to get up and move and get out of territory, and
that's exactly right, right? So they have to up and move stuff around, and so they'll do some things that are very different. But one thing I think Aspen and I could definitely say about is because, like, if you're in a tactical environment and you don't know something, you have to learn it, right? And so it also gives a great explanation for a candidate to be able to kind of tease something out, to go, well, here's how I had all these things that might not make sense in my resume, because why would someone do all those different things? Well, that's why. It's because in this type of environment, you have to do it.
Fascinating. What about in terms of the workflow? Do you see any, like, can you talk about how you're partnering or working with your customers? Are you interacting primarily with the TA team, and you have internal recruiters that you'd partner with on various searches? Are you going directly to hiring managers or leadership on some of these initiatives? How are you working with your clients?
Yeah, for the most part, we're going directly to hiring managers. We do have some larger customers that, we end up going through, what's the word, Drew?
Yeah, I know, like a VMS.
Yeah, exactly.
Tools we have to go through. Yeah.
Yeah, but by and large, most of our core business, we're going straight to the hiring managers, and we've kind of done the legwork on the front end to build the relationship there, where we can, send stuff their way and get responses that way. And that's another way. Honeit's been a pretty good account breaker as far as building trust and building a reputation with our, especially new hiring managers, because customer acquisition is by far the most expensive part of our business. From a sales perspective, it takes a long time. You're burning through overhead to get an MSA with a customer. And then in staffing and recruiting, you don't make a dime until you start delivering. And so it's sped up that time to delivery, because now you're flattening the learning curve. You know exactly what questions to screen out. You're teasing out what part of the job description you actually care about by what questions the customer wants you to screen for and stuff like that. So it's sped up the customer acquisition process quite a bit. Yeah. And then it's allowed us to kind of build trust with our hiring managers to where we can kind of be more of a go-to firm than.
Have you started doing your intake calls? You talk about some of those intake calls and the getting to know you calls, like when you kick off a new search. Are you using Honeit for those intake calls, which are interviews too, to learn about the role and ask those great questions to the hiring manager?
So we haven't been doing that. That's another thing that we want to implement. It's we always have so much going on at any given time. It's like, how do you stack rank priorities? But it's a really cool feature that we'd love to implement somehow at some. But
okay, let us know if you need help with that. We can help you. So you're talking about kind of the business development, generating new clients who can leverage this service. That's more difficult than, say, finding candidates at this point. I mean, once you get a rec, what's your process in terms of attracting or finding talent? Are you posting jobs? Are you reaching out? Are you sourcing these candidates? And how do you know if they have like the certifications you need, or are in fact veterans or not veterans? I'm curious.
Yeah, so we're in a bit of a unique position here. So we've done a lot of legwork to define our niche, and most of our customers are going to fall in this very specific market niche. Plain and simple, it's IT jobs that require, this specific certification and this level of clearance, and all of our customers are looking for that. That's the baseline requirement. Now, there always are a few specifics whenever you get a rec, that you're going to need on top of that, and that's what recruiters are for, right? And so whenever our sourcing efforts are relatively consistent, we're always going out, we're looking for the same type of person. But then when that person gets on the phone with the recruiter, that's where the recruiter kind of plays matchmaker and is able to educate the candidate on what the customer requirements are. And then, later on, once you get to the submittal stage, educate the customer on what the candidate's, the candidate's background is. So we're in a bit of a weird position where we're not necessarily going out getting a rec, head hunting for that rec. We do it from time to time, but
you're pipelining always on.
It's portfolio approach. It's portfolio recruiting. Right.
And are you able to catch people when they come back from deployment, or in that transition phase right away where they might be open to relocate to wherever, or are they looking for a specific city and settled, or?
Drew, you want to talk about the transitioning military program?
Yeah. I mean, that's the ideal time, right? Is when they're getting out, and because if you think about the geography we cover, we're a relatively small company, but we've been in almost 40 states over the past few years just because of all the military installations we support, and a big part of that is getting people like before they transition out, because then they're more flexible on where you go because they haven't settled in anything, anywhere specific yet. So no, that's really huge for us. And like one customer, we run a program where we'll pipeline people for about, 6 months, even a year out from when they're getting out. So we can kind of sell them on the program, you introduce them to people, right? You kind of build a relationship. And then as they get closer, you kind of pick a very specific role. So no, it's transition military is invaluable.
Hey, Nick, was he cutting out for you as well?
He was cutting a little bit out for me. I didn't know if that was my internet. It was just starting to slow down. But
no.
So are we saying that there might be some Honeit calls conducted on the submarines right now? Is that happening?
As long as they've got an American phone number.
All right. Wow.
Who knows?
That's cool.
Yeah. But essentially, I don't know how much of that we caught, but we're able to pipeline guys anywhere from 6 months to a year out from their separation date, make introductions, give these guys professional resources on what they should be working on for the next 12 months. These are the certifications to go after. This is what to be studying. Your labs to be working on, to brush up on Cisco networking, things like that. And then once they get close to their separation date, we zero in on specific jobs or locations depending on the program.
That's ideal, right? Yeah, you're right. Because then if they haven't even maybe come back to, if they're abroad or things like that, they're going to get that one-time shipment of goods wherever, right? After they're deployed. And if you can get in front of that, man, you can place them at a client. They've got their stuff set up. They're ready to rock.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Me again?
Yeah, we can see you.
Sorry about that. I had a tab open and I think it screwed everything up. So my bad.
No problem. I noticed on your website you had the veteran spotlights. I thought those are powerful stories, powerful narratives on making that leap. Now, is that something that you typically do with placed candidates? Is that like a standard process? Do you do that for certain folks? I thought it was a really great addition to the website. Made it.
Yeah, so we do it once a month. Yeah,
okay.
We do it once a month. We have a spotlight a month, and it's really just that to make the story more tangible, right? Opposed to talking about someone how someone might how it might transfer. You give a very tangible example of how it does transfer.
Yeah. And we've had, those are all our employees. And so we've had, a ton of different stories. We've had people who came from an IT background in the military. We've got one of our employees was a hospital corpsman in the Navy, and, was working in the medical field, and then, slowly worked on getting his certs. He did have an IT job for a couple of years before us. And then we ended up bringing him onto this IT program. And so it's cool being able to tell people's story, whether or not somebody was, in the military doing IT or not, and just being able to kind of come along and amplify their story. And hopefully it's a resource to people who are getting out. It's definitely fun for us to be able to do and be able to learn a little bit more about our employees as well.
I love it. I think you guys are kind of formulating an approach to this challenge that is career changes, right? At a high level. Challenge that is career changes, right? At a high level. I heard a little echo there. Sorry. Like just career changes in general. I was having coffee with someone, Tyler Lafferty here in Spokane, who is an entrepreneur, and he just wrote a book, that's a really interesting perspective of how, if you were a high schooler and you were thinking about careers, you hear about doctor and lawyer and some of these basics, but that's kind of it. And then if you like basketball, you think you have to be a pro basketball player to be involved with the profession of basketball in some capacity. Well, in reality, how many thousands of companies and vendors and shoe companies and marketing companies and agencies and things like that revolve around that sport, all of which are filled with various jobs that, some kid in high school has zero idea that all of that's possible. And so you start to think about, find something. His book is called Be More Like You, and really starting to think about what you like and just to start to realize that for whatever hobby or passion or interest you have, there's all sorts of jobs out there related to that particular thing or industry. Mm-hmm. And with a bit of a framework, you can start to uncover how to make some of the connections to people doing that, internships, informational, just starting to think a little more broad than what we might think of it as a kid about 6 types of jobs are available. And I think you guys are solving this from a very interesting angle of veterans and transitions. But, I think the broader topic is how does, someone who is a nurse that wants to get into technology make that transition potentially, right? And there's been some really interesting companies out there like General Assembly, some of these boot camp type companies where you can take a 12-week course and learn to code. And, I think that's really powerful. And then to figure out how to connect those internships or those boot camps to maybe that first internship is the gap there. But it's really interesting. It's one of those things we're not taught in school, like home economics, we learn to do some of the things around the house, but like work economics, it's this big gap in high school and even college.
No, it really is. It really is. I was just talking to a friend of mine who is just graduated from high school, not from high school, sorry, from college. And he's looking for jobs and applying, and he's reading through job descriptions, and he's like, "Hey, what does this mean? Like, I don't know what business development is." And it's like, oh, that becomes so ingrained in the vernacular of the business world, and the IT world has the same thing. What's a network analyst, and how is that different from a network administrator, and how is that different from a systems administrator, and all that stuff becomes so ingrained in the vernacular that you don't really think that somebody who's coming out of college or getting out of the military, where they're used to talking about things in a specific way, is going to intuitively understand. There's another translation layer for you.
That's where I thought this profession was so interesting. Like, I don't know if you guys set out or knew about recruiting, but I didn't know about it, fell into it, but it became fascinating for just that reason. Not only are we learning about how software is built and the internet works, but you're also learning about like how businesses operate and the departments and the teams and the roles and how it all fits together. How did Aspen and Drew, how did you get into recruiting? Was this your first role, or did you work elsewhere before Tango Alpha?
Drew's been doing this longer than I have, so I'll let him go first.
A little bit. So, I mean, I got hired by Tech Systems, Aerotech at the time, right? College, and I've kind of been in the business.
This is kind of funny, actually, the delay on this explanation.
I know.
Once upon a time, I was. Your voice slowed down. It was really funny.
Oh yeah.
Your voice slowed down.
I'm sorry. Got everything closed down. I'm not quite sure what the issue is.
Drew, you need to switch internet providers, man.
Coffee break.
Internet providers, man.
Why don't you go, Aspen?
Yeah, I can absolutely
Is this
go.
your first one? Why don't you go, Aspen?
Yeah, I can absolutely. There he is. He muted himself. Yeah, I definitely stumbled into it. So I graduated college I graduated from A&M a few years back, back in 2019, and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had an economics degree. I've definitely always been a math guy. Spent the first couple of years in college in engineering until I realized what engineers do, and it didn't seem super interesting to me. And so I graduated, didn't really have a ton of idea what I'd done or what I was wanting to do. Stumbled into a sales job, worked in the startup world for about a year or so. And then I was engaged at the time. My wife, or I guess soon to be wife, now wife, and I were going to be moving to Austin because we had a bunch of friends there, and it seemed like a really good place to kick off the first couple of years of our marriage. So started looking for jobs in Austin. And one of my old roommates was running our HR at Tango Alpha 3, and so just kind of stumbled into recruiting, and it's been fun though. It's definitely a learning curve, but coming to recruiting with a sales background has been really interesting because your approach is a little bit different. I mean, we definitely tend to be in with an economics background, specifically like quantitative economics. Like we were very much numbers guys, and so like the data doesn't lie. It's an input-output game, stuff like that. Yeah, it's been a lot because there's always puzzles to solve your recruiting process, but there's also a human component to building relationships with your employees and your candidates and pushing people, to pursue the jobs and walking through different stages of life with them. It's been fun, and I enjoy the human part of it as well. I mean, even just being in so many locations geographically, I'll talk to people all the time. I just talked to a guy yesterday who is from Spokane. He's getting out of the military. He's looking for a networking job in Spokane. We don't have anything there right now, but I do have a contract.
I'd have to make some intros to you. We'll see if we can find some.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got a contractor at Fairchild, so I just was able to make an introduction, say, hey, so-and-so, this is so-and-so, here's his background. Like, let me know if you know anything. And he sent over, a few different jobs to the guy because I don't know what's going on in the local areas, but I can guarantee you that Drew or I know somebody who knows somebody. And so we're able to kind of network a little bit and help people out and be a part of the story in that way as well.
In that situation, I don't know if you know, but you can hide the name and the resume and the profile pic of candidates on share links and actually share them for biz dev or MPC, kind of candidate marketing to prospective clients. That might be an interesting technique if you find some companies in Spokane and some hiring managers or companies with open jobs, is share a couple of those blind links and they can hear a few great technical answers and stories. And then that might be a great way to catch their attention.
There you go, Drew.
Yeah.
Drew's
show you how that works.
The last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hopefully my Wi-Fi is better right here. But yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, Aspen's absolutely right. I mean, you just provide Honeit provides, I find for the sales element, I find it awesome because you don't have to sell anymore, right? The candidate sells for you, right? So you just kind of go, this is what it is. And honestly, customers are so jaded for how recruiters try to sell them. So it's, now it's just like, well, okay, I'll set my person up for success, make sure they understand your environment, and then it's on them to do that translation. So
hot, don't take my word for it. I'm not going to twist your arm. If you like,
that's exactly right. Yeah, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean, that's the thing. Like sometimes they'll say, I think this person is a great fit, but I don't know. Listen to what they said, right?
And it doesn't. But the best part, it doesn't take that poor hiring manager 45 minutes to get to the top. No. So you're actually giving them a good new option of hey, listen to 2 minutes.
Yep.
Versus, and then you're building trust and credibility at the same time.
Yeah. No. So what happens is you'll go, because I went on a few interviews and these things are 30 minutes long, but in the first 5 minutes you got it wrong. Because I'm in on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I just had 3 nuggets that I could have shared with the program manager beforehand, we could have saved everybody, because then you have 6 people on the call, right? And you're calculating the dollars in your head. I'm like, my gosh, we got it. And that's actually where Aspen recommended you guys. Is there's got to be a way where we can share someone's answers to sample questions before we get 6 people on a call for 30 minutes or an hour, right? and Honeit does a great way. So then they're much less gun shy also.
Yeah,
right?
and they have a little skin in the game too. It's like they already heard the personality, communication style, some of that. So some of that stuff can't be the reason if they don't choose to move forward, right? Because they've already opted into some of that stuff. I'd love to get your thoughts on some of that downstream stuff. So we're excited about extending the platform a little downstream where, after your call, hiring manager's interested, how can we make it really easy to help you schedule that next video call between the two of them or whatnot, or what that some of the downstream flow could be in terms of still conversations, but maybe you can do it inside of Honeit instead of outside of Honeit. So
yeah, I mean, interviews hosted and our platform provides, I guess if when we host interviews, which we have to do some customers where we will host interviews in Zoom, it's always really there's a lot of insight there. I always learn a lot sitting and listening to a hiring manager interview a candidate and seeing what specifically they focus on, where things go well, where I miss the mark as a recruiter and educating the candidate the job, things like that. And so, anytime you can give a recruiter access to things like that, it's going to make them better. And if Honeit becomes an easy way to do it, hiring managers like things that are easy. So if the easiest thing to do it is or easiest way to schedule an interview is to do something in Honeit, people are going to want to use it. And that provides a really good resource for recruiters.
Yeah, we can give you we can let you get your hiring manager's scheduling links even, right? And where send the candidate a link. Hey, client heard back from the client. They love what they heard. Here's a link to book a call for 45-minute video call to keep the conversation with the hiring manager.
Yeah.
Invites go out. So we're excited about accelerating all those steps that become tedious. Drew and Aspen, I think we're like over time, but I really appreciate it. You've been a wonderful customer. I'm really excited to kind of continue working with you. Please let us know, feedback on the platform. We're always looking for areas of improvement, but really excited about what you're doing. And I think this disconnect, this miscommunication that you're solving from veteran to civilian is a really, really powerful thing to work on. And we're excited to help you, escalate that and get that word out and hopefully get some clients from this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate it, Nick. And we've enjoyed working with you guys as well. Y'all support has always been fantastic. The turnaround time on anything that we ever need is always so fast. And half the time, Nick, you're the one taking care of stuff for us. So we really appreciate you guys and everything you've done for us. It's an awesome product and very clearly an awesome support team behind it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Let us know if you need anything and really appreciate your time today.